So it was an unusual upbringing, and that was where your identity is kind of handed to you and imposed upon you, and you have to kind of adopt the identity of the group culture that you're born into. Because my entire family were part of that group, it was really all I knew.
Yeah.
Whether or not you fit into it is irrelevant.
How did you find growing up in that? I know that's the only thing that you knew, but did you find that things that didn't make sense to you, or did you question many things?
I was definitely a black sheep, let's
Yeah.
say. And I remember one of my earliest memories, I was sat on the floor at school, and I must have been a tiny, tiny tot. I must have only just started school. And I was looking at my hands and thinking to myself, wow, isn't it amazing that I'm here in this body and not in that other one? And I had in my mind this other person. And nobody had ever told me about reincarnation or any of these things. I just had these ideas in my mind, and that seemed to make sense to me. And it was only later where I was told that most of my thoughts were wrong, or, maybe satanic or from the devil. So for a little child to learn that their own internal thoughts are
Evil.
potentially demonic or evil,
Yeah.
yeah, it's quite a thing to internalize from a really young age. And I was a very sensitive child, very gentle. I really did care about, other people and animals and other little children and things like that. And I found the kind of general culture in a cult is quite judgmental.
Yeah.
And so people are taught that, if you don't follow their script and you don't meet their criteria and expectations for what is a good Jehovah's Witness, that's the cult I grew up in, then you are classified as bad association or worldly. And that's exactly how my family were classified. My mum had quite significant mental health problems, and so she stopped attending when my sister was born. And my father travelled for work a lot. So automatically, because we weren't there front row, every single meeting, we were already quite ostracized. And so where they might have a barbecue or a children's play arrangement, I was excluded from those from quite a young age.
It's so controlling though, and I've spoke to people that's been in cults like in America, and as soon as you want to do anything other than what they tell you to do, you're ostracized as well.
Yeah.
So it's that fear of being questioned. This doesn't make sense. That's all. And if you don't be totally devoted to us, then you're no good. Something's wrong.
Yeah, and I think definitely asking questions is somewhat frowned upon. And I was one of those unfortunate people that, I still am, that asks lots of inconvenient questions that nobody wants me to ask.
Absolutely.
So,
Because it's got a narrative, and it's okay as long as people follow a narrative. But as soon as people question it, questions in religions is like cancer to religion. When you ask a question,
sometimes, I think people can be, when people start adopting religion as a personal identity, it can be quite threatening to ask a question. That's not just religions either. That could be political or else that people adopt as an identity. And what I find is if it is, if I am this thing and it is me, and you start to question it, you're almost questioning that person as an individual. And it can feel incredibly threatening to people. So they don't take it that well. I think there's fewer people like I think yourself, and there's fewer people who are willing to have their own personal identity challenged. And if you can, it's incredibly empowering because it's much easier for you to explore and question things. But in a group environment like that, you can see that it is highly protected. The group's identity is maintained above everything else. And they have a lot of internal language and phraseology that gets kind of the group speak that you kind of repeat. And one of them is not to bring reproach on the organization or bring reproach on Jehovah's name or God's name. And what they mean by that is, let's say, for example, something terrible has happened inside the congregation. So there's some kind of abuse or attack or something like that inside, committed by one of their own members, and you want to report it. They don't outright tell you can't report it to the police, but they would say, we don't want to bring reproach on the organization. Basically, they're trying to maintain, the PR for God. He needs someone to do his PR for him because, he didn't write that in the Bible, but that's what he meant. So they maintain that kind of PR, making sure that his
Let's
name.
let's cover it up and keep the narrative going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's maintaining the identity basically. And I think you'll get that a lot in the families, individual families. So for example, with my family, they were the type of family where you just don't say that. That's not nice. Keep it nice. Don't tell anyone what happened yesterday. Don't say this, don't say that. And if you point things out that are happening within the family, you're the troublemaker. So I remember my mum was suffering domestic abuse and my father dropped me off at her house and he knew it was going on. Everyone knew it was going on. She opened the door. She's black and blue. I think I was in my teens. And my stepfather was there and my mother was there. And I said, oh my God, what's happened to your face? Because when I was a small child, I was quite meek and I didn't say very much. But as soon as I got to be a teenager, I just couldn't keep my mouth shut. And she gave me some nonsense about falling into the door or something. I kept persisting with it. You very quickly, person like that in that environment very quickly gets scapegoated and placed into
of course.
Troublemaker, McQueen, hysterical, mentally ill. Yeah, it's not. If you're a truth teller and you're somebody like that, it's a terrible environment to grow up.
Yeah, they're not going to want you around that because if you're telling the truth and you're raising questions and somebody else starts asking you questions and then they start asking questions there, so they want to nip it in the bud straight away, so and cut that person out or get them to back in line.
What's interesting as well about that, and I'm speaking out there to all the other truth tellers and scapegoats, is that I only found out recently that, and when I say recently, I mean a couple of months ago, that I would be classified as a scapegoat. That's how I was treated and kind of categorized, I suppose, by the behavior of the other people around me. I just thought I just couldn't get on, and it was sort of my fault that, all these people had such a problem with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because of something to do with me. And
it
really, it was so funny when I sort of clocked it and I thought, that really does meet that criteria. So I think a lot of scapegoats feel like that. Why can't I get on with all these people?
Yeah, it is because
I'm trying. Why can't I?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just if somebody's got too much of a strong personality, they're inquisitive. Things don't make sense, and they want to ask. They're not going to get on because you're not falling into line like most other people are doing. So you are going to stand out.
Well, I think like most scapegoats as well. I actually did try to keep my mouth shut and to stay under the radar.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I was quite a quiet person. Had a very strong sense of justice, particularly when it came to people who I felt just couldn't advocate for themselves or had trouble speaking up for themselves. When I came across that, I just couldn't stay quiet. And so the only time people would not hear anything from me at all until I really had something to say, and then I would say it quite loudly. And so that's their impression of who that is. And I think that's similar for lots of people who've been scapegoated, is they actually do try not to create any more trouble for themselves than they already have.
Yeah.
But there's certain things they just can't stay quiet about.
No, exactly. I think if you got a strong personality, you can't stay silent. When did you realise something wasn't right with what was going on?
I think I always knew something wasn't right, because I remember being in listening to their talks and things and hearing them say the most horrendous things, like how everybody's going to be destroyed and how people who don't believe they're going to be destroyed and killed, and that includes babies and all that kind of stuff. And I remember looking around at everyone and thinking they hear what I heard, and looking at them and they're all going yes, and nodding along, and then feeling like I don't know, like invaders of the body snatched or something. You're like, oh my God, I hope they don't clock me. So you're trying to kind of blend in a bit. But then as time went on, I was exposed to more. So I think the older I got, I was exposed to more of what was going on beneath the surface. And there was a couple of incidents. My own marriage, I think, definitely created a great deal of tension for me, where because they advertise themselves internally as like, they can save your marriage and they can help your mental health, and they come around and see you and talk to you and stuff like that if you're having problems, and we constantly had problems. And I remember there was a few incidents that happened there where they'd come around to see me, and I was really hopeful because I thought, oh, we're going to get helped. And I was always a really hopeful person, like just had this kind of like just unbreakable hope where things would be just horrendous, and I'd be like, oh, it might get better,
Yeah, yeah.
And they left, and I thought, oh, I've been heard, And I remember seeing a text message on my ex-husband's phone the next day, and he said, don't listen to her. She's talking rubbish. She's mentally ill. She's hormonal at the moment. It's just absolute nonsense. I don't know what to do with her. And I remember reading this and just my heart just sank. I was heartbroken. Like I could just see like this lifeboat coming where I was stranded on this island, and it was just moving away to the other side of, oh, don't leave me, So there was, things like that. But then there was also a couple of really severe incidents that happened. One which was domestic violence, and another one which was an assault on a friend of mine. Not only did nothing get done about them, but also they supported the perpetrators. So the women who had been attacked and abused were kind of shunned and ostracized and judged.
Even though they're the victims.
Yes. And the perpetrators were supported. And I remember speaking, I had warned a couple of women about this one person who'd attacked my friend and said, please keep your distance. Do not get involved. Don't get personal with them. And I remember getting a call from one of the elders in the congregation. That's their priests. They don't have one priest. They have like a group of them. And being told not to keep speaking about it, and that I should be more forgiving, and that I wasn't showing a forgiving attitude, and people make mistakes and things like that. And at that point, I'd been forced to attend the same congregation with this person. And, I have my own, my own traumas growing up. A 9 out of 10 on the ACEs score, so the Adverse Childhood Experience score. And my PTSD, I just couldn't cope with attending this congregation and having to face this person. I would have panic attacks. I would vomit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was in such a state, I was going day to day, just surviving each night by getting on the phone to Samaritans and just saying, I just need to get through tonight. I just need to get through tonight. And I got to that point of desperation where I thought, I can't stay because I'm not going to survive. I just felt like that's how I felt, whether it's true or not, that is how I felt. And at that point, I was very broken in my mind, actually, because what I was thinking was, I'll leave and I'll recover myself and I'll get myself better, because obviously I'm a terrible burden on everybody. And once I'm better, I'll come back and then I'll be able to tolerate it. It's like the worst reasoning that you could possibly imagine. Like, oh, I've just had every bone broken in my body. I'll go and recover and get stronger. Then I can go back and be beaten up some more. And yeah, that was kind of what led up to it. And after I got out, and you have some distance from it and some perspective, you're suddenly like, oh my God, where?
Yeah, when you're on the outside.
Where have I been? What was that? Yeah.
Yeah, because when you're in an abusive relationship or in like a cult or just the environment that you're in, it becomes normalized, even if it's really violent and abusive. And clients I've had have tried to normalize really extreme things. And I have to explain sometimes that just because you've normalized it doesn't make it any less serious, because that's all they know or whatever. But it's not until people step away from it, and then after a period of time, they look back and go, I mean, I was in the middle of that.
Yeah.
How did I not realize?
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, the one thing I say to people as well is, just because you normalized it doesn't mean it didn't affect you as well. Because sometimes, like, you can hear me talk about things, and I talk about them quite matter of fact, because there's a part of me that is able to compartmentalize the experience from the narrative. So I'm able to kind of talk about it and rationalize and intellectualize and examine it too as well. But that doesn't mean it doesn't affect you. And then with quite significant trauma, what I find with people is you have to get below the narrative layer. And there's a lot of very hidden compartments which you can only access like one at a time. It's important to do so because it does affect your decision making and what you choose in your life. So I always tell people it's a bit like having a software program running in the background that you're kind of unaware of, and it's not really causing a problem, but it does affect how you perceive the world and the choices you make.
Yeah, especially if it's a trauma or you've been through a lot in childhood there as well. You view the world as how your childhood was there as well. So you're going to have belief systems. And as you deal with things, you realize they're out of date and you have to change that thought process and work on yourself, learn to manage trauma because obviously it never goes away. And that's a lot there. And a lot of the times people don't realize what they're going through.
It's funny you say that because I remember about just over a year ago, had a session of hypnotherapy, the trauma-based hypnotherapy, and I was telling, it was only on a very specific subject. It was fear of the police. And that's what I'd gone in with. I said, oh, I want to deal with this particular thing. And he asked me about the background. I was telling him about everything that had been going on. And he said, and how long ago was this? And I said, oh, it was 3 years ago. It's 4 years now. And he said, oh, so you're still really in the thick of it. And I went, no, I feel quite settled now. Like, fine. Because I think you are in some ways trained and conditioned to go, everything's fine. They're fine. I'm fine. Because of this normalization of the things that are really not normal.
And I find that people that's been through stuff tend to play it down, trivialize it. And that's often a coping mechanism, a survival technique there as well. It wasn't that bad. And I've had it with clients where they've told me what they've been through and they're like, oh, it's not really a big deal. Why are you looking like that? And I'm like, right, imagine if one of your friends had said the same back to you. What do you think? They're like, oh my God, that'd be terrible. I said, so what's the difference? And they're like, oh yeah, I realise that now. So
it is funny like how it's a strange thing to have to deal with. I remember some years ago I've been referred for some trauma therapy, but I was still living in the environment I was in. And I hadn't spoken to the trauma therapist about the cult at all. Not even once did I ever mention it to him. But we did talk a little bit about my brother, because my brother had a very severe conduct disorder. And I was telling him about how my brother had often been incredibly violent, suffocating me or strangling me or trying to drown me, things like that. Him asking, what that was like, and he was just saying, well, I just feel quite resigned about it, really. I mean, there's nothing I can do, right? And he said, well, can I tell you how I'm experiencing that? And he said, I'm appalled. And I remember being quite jarred, like, really? Because you sort of telling it like, oh, well, when your brother puts a pillow in your face and he just suffocates you like that, when he does that. And he's like, no. Well, okay, well, when he holds you under the water so that you think you're going to die, like that, like when he does that, and you're like, and he just goes, no, Holly, that's not normal. And it's because you kind of normalize it. I remember my father, when he got remarried, had my brother removed from the house because he said, I can't have him exposed to his new wife. And I remember at the time we all went, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, we couldn't have that. That would be terrible. Like, imagine him doing those things to her. But it was fine for us, everyone accepted that it was okay for us to be treated that way. And it's a really hard thing to get your head around. I think I'm still trying to get my head around it now, about how it's like you would be appalled at someone else being treated that way.
Yeah.
But it's okay for you to be treated that way.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm a terrible parent, terrible mother. And even now, I know all the answers, but you still look and just like, how could you allow those things to happen? And you knew about it and you didn't do anything about it. And I remember with like my own therapist, and I was reading a book called Toxic Parents, great book. And the lady that wrote it said that there's no excuse for a parent not to keep their children safe. And that is like so true. It's, it must go against their natural instincts to not keep their children safe, to bury their heads, to ignore it, to turn the other way, or to be a part of it. It's mind blowing how people could be like that.
It's hard. I think it's very hard to get your head around things. Sometimes I've thought back to my own parents, and a lot of the time I think they're just very preoccupied with their own problems, and they did have problems, and I think because they wanted us to be okay, that was enough. So it was enough for them to want us to be okay.
Yeah,
but it wasn't quite enough for them to ensure that we were okay.
Yeah, if you can tell yourself a narrative, oh, they're fine, and like my mum would trivialize everything. She'd trivialize
Yeah.
it. Yeah, and that's the way.
Because it made her feel better about
Yeah,
what was happening.
yeah, yeah,
My own mum, she did that as well. She used to say to us, well, yes, but you're fine. That never affected you.
yeah. So you're being gaslit for your own traumas. It didn't affect you. But like when I tried to get my own mother sent to prison, the police officer contacted me afterwards and said, "Oh, we've spoken to her. She lied all the way through the interview." And I was like, "How can you tell?" He said, "We can tell if people's lying." And they said they knew she was lying because every time they asked her a question that she was happy to answer, she could add amazing recollection, remember every single thing, answer that. If it was something she didn't want to answer, she was vague, can't remember that, it didn't happen like that. Lee was always so sensitive, all this sort of stuff as well. So, and that was all the same things that she used to say to me when I would like say stuff. And she'd be like, "Oh, you're so sensitive. You always think everyone's against you. You always think this, you always think that." So she would gaslight you and then trivialize your own feelings and tell you what your feelings should be, which is terrible.
Yeah. I remember, I've got mixed feelings. I love my mum and I was very, very, very attached to her. She died 10 years ago. And I cared for her until she passed away. Part of the way that I got into the job that I'm doing now was because of her. And so she was a massive influence on my life. But in some ways, she was so broken herself, she just couldn't cope with us not being okay. And I
Yeah.
think for her, she told herself a story.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
You're fine. You're okay. That doesn't affect you. That didn't
Yeah,
affect you.
yeah,
That didn't affect you. And to be honest, because I was quite enmeshed with her, I just went, "Oh, right, yeah, yeah, because we're fine. We're okay. That didn't affect us." It's almost like brainwashing. I don't think that was her intention, but that was the impact.
yeah,
And I remember after she passed away, one of the hardest things about her passing away is I didn't know what to think because there was no one to tell me what to think about things.
yeah,
So when something came up, I was like, "Oh, what am I supposed to think about this? No one's here to tell me what to think about this situation that's come up." And it's not like I couldn't reason or intellectualize or, I'm not stupid, but I didn't know how to feel about things because no one was there to say, this is how to feel about it.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
I totally get that, especially if you had a lifetime being told how to think and feel about things. Don't do this, don't
Yeah.
do that. How did you get past that? Because a lot of people probably had a lot of therapy for it. How did you get through being able to learn to think for yourself without any consequences?
It was actually very difficult to do that while I was still in the cult because
Of course.
everything is imposed on you so much. When I did actually think things, I was told that my thinking was wrong, or broken or sick or, whatever it was mentally. So if I did have a thought or an opinion, it was heavily clamped down on. I was so gaslighted that I was a terrible person. I was a troublemaker, that I was bad. There was all these, I just had such low views of myself. It was very hard to understand what my own thoughts were. It's interesting because I was I was a very avid writer and I wrote a lot. And when I go back and read through the things I've written, I actually did know what I thought about things. It was very clear, very, very clear. And I had very, very strong views on things. I just couldn't express them in that environment or
Yeah.
fully embody or own them, I think. I think that's maybe the best way of putting it.
Yeah.
And it was only really after I got out and I was shunned and I had no one. So I didn't have anyone to rely on at all. And it was it was awful because, I had no money, no legal support, where to work, where to live. I had my son. I didn't know how to do things, been restricted from, for example, my ex-husband, he had all the bills in his name. He never let me see them. I didn't know how much some things cost or how to organize certain things. It was a bit like being a child thrust into
An adult
adult
world.
world.
Yeah.
And there's no one to help you,
Yeah.
and I tried to get help from the Citizens Advice or Council. At every turn, I was kind of just shooed away. Or even more scary, it felt scary where I thought, I wonder if if asking for help is going to come back on me, because I was so terrified of losing my son. And so I had to learn very, very quickly how to make decisions. And it wasn't a particularly nice environment to learn because it was incredibly high pressure. But it really was, you're being thrown into the middle of the ocean to learn to swim. And you better learn to swim damn well quick or you're going to drown. That was how I learned to swim. And it was pretty tough, Now, obviously, I have an enormous sense of my own capability, and I know that if something comes up, I'll figure things out, and I know that because I already have done it. I like where I am now, but sometimes I do get just exhausted making decisions all the time with no one to ask, or no one I can go to and say, oh, what do you think about this, or what should I do about that? It's on my
and so sometimes you like, is this a good decision? Is it a bad decision? There's no one to get that like input there as well. What was the moment that you decided to leave the cult and get out?
So I'd asked for a divorce a few times and been talked back into staying, and eventually my now ex-husband asked for a divorce, and he said he was going to divorce me. And I managed to get the divorce application signed, and I just saw this like crack open in the door. You're like someone left the cell door open, and I just saw the light through the door, and the guard had stepped away for a second. And I just thought, I've got to get out. I've got to get out. And so I took quite drastic steps, if I'm honest. But I did get out. And so it was almost like, in some ways, I'd been mentally planning this for a few years. I've been building up my business. I've been trying to come up with plans on the drawing board about what I would do or how I would do it, because I knew my ex would find a way not to ensure that he didn't have to pay me any child support or anything like that. So I thought, it's all going to be on me. How am I going to do this? And I kind of had plans in the works, and I was mentally preparing a lot as well by just kind of deconstructing things in my mind. And in terms of really my own identity, I've been deconstructing my own identity, if I'm honest, and kind of breaking myself down to the point where I was almost just like, I don't exist as a person. I'm not really a person. That's where I got to. And I think it was subconsciously deliberate sabotage, because I knew that in some ways I had to be nothing to get out. It sounds like a strange thing to do, but I'm almost destroying my own identity before they do.
Yes.
So that I'm free to, I don't know. It was that's, looking back, you can see the progress, particularly because I kept a lot of my notes and my writing. You can see this gradual breakdown where I'm just erasing myself to nothing at all. This absolute ego death.
And the moment of no return, did you know that was it? You'll go and you'll leave and you're never coming back?
Yeah, when I was terrified I'd get talked back into staying again, terrified. And I kept trying to ensure that steps were taken. Nothing was happening. The feet were being dragged, and I was terrified. And so I did what most people do when they leave a cult or try to get out of a cult, which is massive self-sabotage. And I had a fling with someone. And part of the reason that people do that is because you are burning every bridge. You will be kicked out, and you will be, you've sealed your fate when you do that.
Makes sense.
Because people can, in the cult, people can abuse. They can domestic violence. All kinds of assault can take place. But if you are a woman and you commit fornication or adultery, because although we'd signed the divorce application, the divorce hadn't gone through, then you're as good as destroyed. So that was the point of no return. I knew that was my death. It was the fatal blow. And to be honest, it's actually a very sad thing, because it was the thing that was used to turn my daughter against me, and I never saw her again after that. Although I got out and I am free, they're
come at a heavy cost. No,
it was a very heavy cost, and it wasn't without collateral damage. Yeah. And the worst part of it is not the damage to me, but it's the damage to her, for her to lose her mother, because with parental alienation, they're not just separated from a parent, they are conditioned to believe that the parent they had was not what they thought.
Yeah.
So all of their good memories become distorted and tainted.
Yeah.
So everything that I ever did with her is either erased or twisted and distorted in her mind, so that she believes that she didn't have a mother. And I just think that's probably the most hard.
Oh yeah, of course. Absolutely.
And it's, it's the one that, you'll never get over, I think.
Yeah, of course. For any parent, even more so for a mother, which
Yeah.
is awful. When did you realize you were finally free of abusive marriage, being in a Jehovah's Witness cult, which is exactly what it is?
It was quite a while, because of the first sort of 9 months or so I was homeless, and, the divorce hadn't finalized. Was still question about, I was terrified of losing my son. I had to get I had to get employment so that I could get a house and somewhere to live for us. And the employment that I took was extremely challenging and quite toxic. And so for a long time, probably a couple of years, the aftermath of trying to settle and to feel safe took a very long time. But I got my house and I managed to get out of the employment. I restarted my business. I started to kind of shed off, the weight that I didn't need anymore. Build build up my own thoughts and my own ideas. And what was interesting is, as soon as that point, I can tell you the point that it happened, that I just came into myself. I remember I have a cabin where I see clients, and I was stood in my cabin. And it was like my mind opened up to the universe, and all of these thoughts just started flooding in. All of these things I'd been note taking, basically. What I'd been doing intuitively, making the intangible tangible for clients, I'd been doing without understanding what I was doing. I'd been recovering myself without understanding how I was doing it. And all of a sudden, it just became clear. And I just started to be able to write everything down and build all these models. And I had much less interest in what I had lost or the threat. I had much less interest in the threat of the other people, because I was so absorbed in terms of the model I was building and the recovery and how this was going to help people. And I just, the passion in my heart, I suddenly understood why I was here, why I needed to get out, because there's no way that there would have been space for that when your mind is so occupied with threat. No. And that was the point where I knew the threat dropped away, and immediately left such a huge space there. It was like just the universe dropped into my head, and I was like, eureka, The
moment you broke free, do you reckon? That's the moment.
That's the moment I broke free. It wasn't the day I left. It was.
No, it's that psychological, I'm free.
Yeah, and it kind of happened spontaneously as well. It was a strange moment, but a very, very beautiful one. I mean, I can tell you about small things, where I'd bought my house, and my son and I, we got the keys, and we didn't have any furniture or anything. We opened the door, and we just really wanted to be in this house. There was nothing in it. We had no furniture, but we just sat on the floor with my laptop and ordered a pizza to this house, and just sat on the floor just watching a movie on my laptop, eating pizza, because it was our house, and we were just so enamored that we'd have been homeless for 9 months, and now I've got our house. I did it,
Yeah, it must be an unbelievable feeling.
It was amazing.
It's a new start. You're away from absolute cult, and you've got freedom again, and your life can be what you want it to be. Nobody can tell you what to do now.
No. And one thing I'd said to my son all along, because I said to him, I'd been honest with him, and I said, sometimes we go through difficult times, and that does happen in life. Life isn't always peaches and cream. Sometimes it's challenging, but we've got each other, and look how these people are helping us. And, because we had a lot of help from strangers, and look how kind these people are. There's really good people in the world. And I said to him, I promise you, I am going to buy you a house, and I am going to take you on holiday, because it was really important to me that we weren't just surviving, we were going to live, Yep. And every single opportunity I had, even in the most challenging periods, if I had an opportunity to do something really cool or really fun, we would go for it.
Yeah.
And the first holiday I did take him on holiday, fulfilled my promise. He was 9 years old, and we went. Well, he went paragliding, and it was like it's one of the biggest memories. I asked him recently, what was the most powerful memories that you have from your life? And he said, the day that we got the keys to our house and the day I went paragliding, because I think it was just like the epitome and of this beautiful symbol of freedom, just literally
Yeah.
flying
Yeah.
through the air at 9 years old. And I just, whatever experience I could give him, I wanted to make it happen. I always say to him, magic mummy makes it happen. So if he comes to me with an idea, I'm like, well,
You
I
do your
wonder how we
best.
can make this happen. Yeah, let's make it happen.
Yeah. And you're like thriving now in what you're doing for a living there. And you've like doing your own research there as well about what people's bodies, things like that. Because I'm a big fan of the body talks to us. I'm a massive fan of that.
It does. Yeah. And what I'd been observing with myself and also with clients across years, and I'd been absentmindedly note taking. I'm like, I write things in my sleep. Sometimes I've woken up in the morning. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So I just randomly take all these notes. Like, oh, I just noted that. And I remember I said this moment where everything just came together and collated into this pattern I could suddenly see. And what I'd been note taking across was all the times that the body had been speaking to me. And I had noted it, but I hadn't kind of brought it enough into the foreground to do more with it. I'd observed it at the time and dealt with it at the time. But what I'd been noticing is that the body has a very unique pattern of language that is movement. And you'll see similar patterns of movements across the same demographics of clients. So you'll see similar movements with clients that have had a history of bullying, for example. Usually it's like orofacial movements and head tilts and things like that. Or you'll see people who've had physical trauma, certain types of movements that the body will like literally take through the midline and the pelvis, for instance. And what I had been noticing is that, or what I had kind of noted to myself was that each movement, this is what I wrote, each movement is a word and sequence of movements is a sentence. And then it's punctuated with a full stop, which is a yawn or a sigh, which is basically your body's way of kind of resetting the respiratory system and therefore resetting things back to a kind of baseline state. So you'll see the body go through a sequence a few times. It repeat the sequence. So it would do something like, it would go like head, shoulder, mouth, head, shoulder, mouth, head, shoulder. It would repeat it a few times. And then it would go, and then it would just completely relax. And you would see it soften and settle, almost as if it's like, well, I've said my piece. And now that's all I needed to say, And after people came out of having that type of therapy, they would always be very, very calm. And in fact, they always reported the same thing. And they always said, I feel clear, I feel calm, I feel neutral. Even if they'd never spoken to anyone else who'd had that therapy, they all said the same thing, which was really weird. And it's just a very fascinating thing to see expanding. I think I logged these movements and basically tracked where they were neurologically. So what neurological path do these movements occur on? And I've got a database of about 400 neurologically tagged movements at the moment. So my aim moving forward, and I have someone else working for me because I have too much to do, is to train these movements into AI. And there's huge amounts of capability that could be done with that moving forward, in the world of like, neuro rehab. And there's gadgets and things that I've sketched out and designed and put to one side, and there's a lot of other things that could be done with it. But it forms the therapy because I worked out how to trigger people deliberately into this conversation, and the therapy forms part of a wider recovery program that I implement with people who have complex trauma or chronic pain, health conditions and things like that.
I think that's brilliant. That's great. Yeah, like I said, I'm such a big fan of listening to the body. I'll get my clients to do it. I'll get them to really work on listening to what your body's telling you. Yeah, don't ever soldier on. Don't ignore what your body's telling you. It's telling you something for a reason. Yeah, so I think what you're doing is brilliant there as well. You've got so
don't
many
you
ideas.
find as a therapist as well that the client will be saying something verbally and their body's saying something else?
Always.
Yeah. And if you track both conversations, the good therapist will track both conversations at the same time. I remember once I was having a session with someone and hypnosis, And I was talking about how I didn't know how to internalize positive identity about myself. I said, I just don't know where to put it like that. That I have no place. I don't know where to put it. And he said, well, I think your body knows. It was quite interesting.
Yeah.
The body's like, it's here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm always with clients, I'm like, okay, where do you feel it in your body? Put your hand on where you feel it, hold it there. What's it telling you? But yeah, many times clients are telling me one thing, but their body's telling me the opposite. And I'm like, you're saying this, but your body is acting in that way, like it wants to avoid it. What's going on there? And actually, you know, and it's amazing how often a client will come to therapy for the first time. Leo, I really want to work on this. 2 seconds later, they're talking about needing to work on something completely different, which is very, very standard there.
Well, what I've found about that is that the reason the way I approach recovery is body led is because the body is far more aware of what is immediately accessible than the mind is. So I think sometimes the mind will say, I want to work on this. And let's say there's doors. I said, like, there's doors, right? Let's say, and that's behind door 2. But the mind's like, I want to work on this thing behind door 2. But the body knows, well, there's another door there. There's door 1 in front of it, and you can't access door 2. So sometimes if you push things mentally, so if the therapist and the client mentally pushes, you'll meet a lot of resistance, or you'll get what I call like snapback. So you'll get like a temporary agreement about something, and it will just revert back to the way it was before. Whereas if you allow things to be quite body led, the client will say, I want to work on this, but the body will go, well, that's fine, but we actually need to sort this out first. And so then you get very organic and very organic shifts that come with ease. And the shifts are, you know, they're permanent. So you have to work on things a little bit afterwards and reinforce things, but the shifts themselves become easier to work with for the client. So there's less tension and less friction about the work.
I get it with clients where in the past where they're trying to talk about something that their body is not ready to talk about, and they're trying to force it. They shut down or they get emotional. I'm like, just leave it. Your body's telling you you're not ready to talk about it. You might leave it for weeks, couple of months, and you're working towards it, and then you get to a point of the part that person struggled to speak about and got nowhere near being able to talk about it because their body shut down on it. Whereas now where they've done the work towards it, it's just the next steps. Suddenly it's not as much of a big deal as what it was when they tried it. So yeah, it's so important. I think it's so important.
It definitely is. And I think some people can get frustrated with the pace sometimes because occasionally the body works a bit slower than what they would like to. But one of the things that I try to educate people around is that if you take smaller steps, but you stabilize that step until it becomes business as usual, not only are you ready for the next step, but the step you just took, you know, that's the way things are now. You're not going to snap back and revert to the way that you were. And I always think, like, to say to people, if you imagine a staircase with 10 steps and there's something at the top you want to get to, most people, what they're doing in therapy is that they're looking at the top and then trying to leap to the top and just crashing back down. And usually, you know, when you're at the bottom, you're unsteady on your feet, you know, you're not in a position where, you know, leaping to the top is, you know, emotionally or physically possible. But if you take that first step, find your footing, steady yourself, stabilize yourself there, feel comfortable here, I feel safe here. And the next step becomes, you know, natural and inevitable.
That's exactly how I work. Because you get clients that they want to get to the end, and you step by step, and I'll explain it to them there as well. It's like deciding you want to do a marathon and you've not been around a block more than once, and then you're setting a target of 10K. You know, you're not going to make 10K. You probably get to the end of the road and then you're exhausted. Maybe if you set yourself a target of going around the block a couple of times, and you know, a bit later on, you're doing a 1K, then a 2, then a 3 and 4. That's more realistic, and your brain is going into that succeeding at things step by step there. So when you get to like the 9K, the next step's the 10K, and you've got that momentum there as well. You're not just trying to jump the gun. So for me, yes, exactly how I work. It works well.
It does work well. I understand because I'm someone who can be quite impatient sometimes
Um,
without
yeah, without
progressing
help.
forwards, and I'm sort of chomping at the bit.
Yeah,
And I really had to teach myself just to be
yeah,
okay where I am, and also to be okay not knowing things sometimes. And one of the most wonderful things I ever taught myself, and now it is business as usual for me, is to not know things and be okay not knowing things, because I trust that the reason I don't know is because I don't have all the information yet, but the information is coming.
yeah,
So I always trust there's a piece of the puzzle down the road. I just haven't got there yet to pick it up. And when I do, this will make more sense. And so being a good note taker, I tend to write notes and then, chuck them off to one side. And then when I get that piece of the puzzle, I'm like, oh yeah, that's where it goes. And having that kind of experience has really built my faith and my trust that that does happen and it does occur. And what it means is you're kind of looking out for the next piece, but it's coming. I know it's going to come. And it has taught me huge amounts of patience, but also comfortable with not knowing, and to be comfortable just like, yeah, I'm not there yet. That's okay.
yeah. And we never are. We're never going to be. It's a journey, not a destination, and we're always learning, we're always expanding. But
Yeah,
as long as we just keep on progressing there, that's all we can do as well. So in that sense, for me, I don't put any pressure on myself.
exactly.
Although I'm like you, I have no patience. I want to be there yesterday. So that's something.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes I'm sort of I think my problem is I'm just really enthusiastic, and I was sort of
Yeah,
like chomping at the bit.
you're
But
making up for lost time though.
I am as well. Yeah, I really get a kick out of
Yeah,
my own progress, and I get a kick out of learning things, and I'm constantly entertained by my own, like, just my own, just sitting there in my own thoughts, like pondering on the nature of consciousness. Don't ever ask me what I'm thinking about. What are you thinking? Well,
no idea. So,
not what's for tea.
so for you, life's pretty good at the moment. Future looks like there's going to be a lot going on there. What's that looking like for you? What you got in mind?
My next steps are, I want to make the biocoding program bigger. It's too much with it just being on me, and neither should it be. It shouldn't be dependent on one person. So my next step is to open my own academy and train other practitioners and therapists, because it's a really good model for recovery. And, I've proved with clients it works over and over again. And I'm just excited about it. I'm excited about the next steps for it. My philosophy behind the program is that you are not dependent on anyone. You're not dependent on a therapist. Now, that doesn't mean you're not connected or interdependent and living in a way that's relational. That's actually quite important. But you don't become dependent on a single therapist.
Definitely not. No.
Yeah. And the philosophy behind it is that I'm really empowering the client to understand and build a really good relationship with their body, whereby they themselves can provide the optimal environment and opportunity for recovery for their body, because they just understand it that much better. And so that's the underlying philosophy behind the whole program. And so I tend to have things like longer sessions with clients and more time between, rather than short, frequent sessions, so that we really get to a proper understanding, and then they have the tools to work on that kind of feed into neuroplasticity principles, where that repetition and the rewiring is happening between, so that the steps they're taking are sustainable. It's not just like quick Instagram pop psych meme, and well, that sounds cool, but it doesn't really work in practice. I'm just that's the next step, I think, for me.
I think it's great. I love what your concept of, and I'll totally agree with you, because like I said, I'm so into what the body says to us, and there's so much there and we often ignore it. So I think it's great there. It's been amazing having you on. I've loved every second of the conversation there. It's been so eye-opening there as well. And I think that your strength has been fantastic to overcome everything you've been through and deal with it the way that you have, to go on to do what you do and love doing with so much enthusiasm. I think is brilliant. And I think whatever you're going to do is going to be amazing there. So Holly, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm sure there's more we could talk about.
Without doubt, that we'll have to do a part 2 quite easily.
Yeah, that's it. All right. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.